12,000 years ago, in what is now northern Israel, an archaeologist uncovered something that stopped the excavation cold. It was a grave, a human grave, which was not unusual. The site was a burial ground, and the team had been carefully documenting the remains of dozens of individuals laid to rest by the Natufian people, one of the earliest known sedentary cultures in human history. What was unusual was what lay inside this particular grave alongside the human remains: a puppy, small, young, no more than a few months old at the time of death, and the human inside the grave, an elderly person, based on skeletal analysis, had been positioned with one hand resting on the puppy's body, not placed near it, not beside it, on it, as if reaching, as if holding. The grave had been sealed for 12,000 years, and what it contained, when archaeologists finally opened it, was an act of love so unambiguous that it crossed the entire distance of recorded human history without losing a single word of its meaning. This is the oldest known burial of a human with a dog. But it is far from the only ancient discovery about the relationship between our species that defies easy explanation, that reaches across millennia and asks questions we are still struggling to answer about what dogs have always been to us and what we have always been to them. These are 7 of them. The first discovery is that grave in northern Israel, but what it reveals goes much deeper than the physical fact of it. The site is called Ain Malaha, and the burial was documented by archaeologist Simon Davis and researcher Francois Valla in a paper published in 1978. The elderly individual and the puppy were buried together in what is interpreted as an intentional, careful interment, the body positioned, the animal placed with deliberate attention, the grave covered in a way that suggested ceremony rather than coincidence. What makes this find extraordinary is not just its age, 12,000 years before the present, predating the pyramids by roughly 8,000 years, but what it implies about the human-dog relationship at that moment. Dogs were not yet fully domesticated. The process was still underway, and yet here, at one of the very earliest moments in that process, is evidence of emotional bond so significant that someone wanted to leave this world with their hand on their dog. The relationship between humans and dogs did not begin with domestication and then develop emotional depth over time. The emotional depth appears to have been present from the very beginning. The love came first. The second discovery comes from Bonn Oberkassel in Germany, where archaeologists uncovered a joint burial of a man, a woman, and a dog dating to approximately 14,000 years ago, making it the oldest confirmed domesticated dog burial yet found, predating Ain Malaha by roughly 2,000 years. What is remarkable is the evidence of care. Analysis published in the Journal of Archaeological Science in 2018 revealed the animal had survived canine distemper, a disease that, without intervention, typically killed young dogs within 3 weeks. The dog showed evidence of having survived multiple episodes while severely ill and unable to function. The only explanation consistent with the physical evidence is that the humans it lived with kept it alive. They fed it. They cared for it. They nursed a sick, young, non-functional dog through repeated bouts of illness over a period of weeks or months, with no economic justification for doing so. The dog was too young and too ill to contribute anything to survival. 14,000 years ago, human beings were nursing sick puppies back to health for no practical reason at all. The concept of caring for an animal that could not reciprocate any utility, that was simply a creature they were attached to, was already present in human behavior before the end of the last ice age. The third discovery is the sheer geographic breadth of ancient human dog burials, which suggests that the emotional relationship between species was not a cultural accident confined to one region. It was something that emerged independently, repeatedly, across human cultures that had no contact with each other. Dogs have been found buried with humans on every inhabited continent, in cultures separated by thousands of miles and years. In the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, East Asia, and across the Pacific, wherever archaeologists find ancient human graves, they find dogs, buried not as objects but with the same care and ceremony applied to human dead. In some ancient cultures, dogs were given their own individual graves, separate from human burials, with grave goods, tools, food, objects placed alongside them. In several archaeological sites in the Americas, dogs were found buried in flexed positions that mirror the positions of honored human dead at the same sites. At a site in Illinois dating to roughly 7,000 years ago, a dog was buried with a complete set of grave goods that researchers have described as indicating high social status within the community. The universality of this pattern, emerging across cultures that could not have shared the practice, suggests that it was not a learned behavior or a transmitted tradition. It was something that arose naturally and repeatedly wherever humans and dogs came into sustained contact. Something about this relationship consistently produced in human beings the desire to honor dogs after death in the same ways they honored each other. The fourth discovery is one of the most technically sophisticated and scientifically surprising findings to emerge from the archaeology of the ancient human-dog relationship in recent decades. Researchers studying the genetics of both ancient and modern dogs have found evidence of a domestication bottleneck, a point in the genetic history of dogs where the population passed through a narrow genetic funnel that suggests the entire global population of domestic dogs descends from a single domestication event. A single population of wolves, in a single geographic region at a single period in history, began a process of domestication that eventually produced every domestic dog on Earth. The details remain debated. Proposed origins range from East Asia to Europe, the timing from 15,000 to 40,000 years ago. But the convergence of evidence on a single origin means that bond we see in those ancient graves began in one place and spread with us across the planet. Dogs accompanied humans out of their original homeland and into every environment on Earth. We did not adopt dogs as we expanded. We brought them with us. They were not a local resource we acquired in each new place. They were companions we carried on a journey that lasted tens of thousands of years. The fifth discovery challenges something that many people assume was a modern development: the idea of dogs as emotional comfort for humans in times of grief, stress, or psychological need. Archaeological evidence suggests dogs were present in ancient healing temples as early as the first millennium BCE. Greek sanctuaries of Asclepius kept dogs as part of their therapeutic practice. Ancient texts describe the temple dogs licking wounds, and modern research has confirmed that dog saliva contains antimicrobial compounds, including lysozyme and immunoglobulins that provide real wound protection. But beyond the physical, there is something else in the ancient record. In multiple cultures, dogs were associated not with physical healing alone, but with the comfort of the dying, the accompaniment of the dead into the afterlife, and the solace of the grieving. The Aztec dog deity Xolotl was specifically associated with guiding the dead through the underworld. In ancient Egyptian religious practice, the jackal-headed god Anubis, often depicted alongside dogs, presided over death and the transition to the afterlife. In ancient Celtic traditions, dogs were associated with healing, protection, and the boundary between the living world and what lay beyond it. Across independent cultures, dogs occupied the same symbolic territory, companions in the most vulnerable moments of human existence. This convergence is not coincidence. It is evidence that the experience of comfort a dog provides was so consistent that every culture that encountered it found ways to make it sacred. The sixth discovery is embedded not in graves or temples, but in bones, specifically in the bones of ancient dogs that show evidence of injuries survived, illnesses overcome, and physical conditions that would have required human assistance to survive. Across multiple archaeological sites, spanning different cultures and time periods, researchers have found the remains of dogs with healed fractures, broken bones that knitted back together, which requires immobilization and care during healing, as well as severe dental disease, limb deformities, and other conditions that would have significantly impaired the dog's ability to function independently. These are animals that could not have survived without sustained human care, and yet they lived. They lived long enough for their bones to record the healing. One example, a site in ancient Peru where a dog with a severely deformed forelimb from birth showed evidence of a long life despite the disability. It could not have worked or contributed practically. It was kept alive because someone was attached to it, because the attachment was enough. The seventh discovery is perhaps the most philosophically significant, and it has to do with what the eyes of ancient dogs tell us about the direction of their own desire. Research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that domestic dogs have a facial muscle, the levata anguli oculi medialis, that wolves do not have. This muscle produces the inner brow raise, that characteristic expression of yearning and emotional appeal that dog owners worldwide recognize immediately. The raised inner brow, the look. What makes this finding extraordinary is its implication for the direction of domestication. The standard narrative of domestication frames it as something humans did to wolves, a process of selection and control initiated by humans for human purposes. But this muscle, this specific anatomical feature that exists only in domestic dogs and not in their wild ancestors, is not useful for hunting, not useful for communication with other dogs, and not useful for any ecological function. It exists for one purpose only: to produce a facial expression that humans find compelling. An expression that produces in humans the desire to engage, to nurture, to respond. Dogs did not merely tolerate domestication. At some point in the long process of becoming what they are, dogs developed an anatomical feature, a new muscle, specifically for the purpose of communicating with us. They evolved toward us, not just genetically selected by us, but actively developing the biological equipment needed to reach us, to look at us in a way that makes us look back. The look your dog gives you, that particular, ancient, specific look, is the product of tens of thousands of years of a species orienting itself toward yours, of a lineage of animals developing, generation by generation, the precise biological tools required to connect with you. 7 ancient discoveries. A hand on a puppy, sealed in stone for 12,000 years. A sick dog nursed through illness for no practical reason. A species buried with honor on every continent. A single origin carried across a planet. Dogs in healing temples at the boundary of life and death. Bones that record a love that kept something alive, and a muscle that grew for no purpose but to look at you. None of this defies explanation. All of it is evidence. Evidence of the same thing, written across 12,000 years of human history, in graves and bones and genes and anatomy. Evidence of a relationship that began before recorded time, and that has never, in all the centuries since, required any reason beyond itself. They chose us. They kept choosing us, generation by generation, bone by bone, muscle by muscle, look by look. And here, across the entire distance of recorded human history, we are still looking back. If this changed something in how you see your dog, leave a comment and tell me what it was. Like this video if it gave you something to carry. And subscribe, because the story of dogs and humans is one of the most extraordinary stories ever written, and we are only just beginning to read it.